Hello and welcome to the Edge of Eternity Set Awards show, which is a concept that I am trying out for this set because I think I wanted to change my typical end of set review video. I kind of have switched over to doing a highlights of my best and worst from my set review, so now I kind of don't really want to be like repeating myself a bunch in the set awards show. And I think this is kind of a more fun way to end the show. I've come up with several awards to give out to cards from Edge of Eternities. If there are awards that you feel I should do in the future, or other good ideas that aren't just direct ripoffs from LR, please let me know. It's impossible to have really a truly original idea at any point in human history, at this stage, but we are trying something that's a little bit different for me, and I will get started with my favorite common. This is the first award, and I'm giving it to Virus Beetle. Um, More because of what it sort of represents. Virus Beetle, sort of being back. It's a reprint that was done well, and I always like when a reprint is done well. Um, Virus Beetle played very well in this format, being an artifact. The discard mattered. There were a lot of ways to sort of recur it. You have your Perigee Beckoner of it all. Just kind of a good two drop. Two drops are going to feature frequently in the favorite common award. For those who know, that's the mana cost that I like to have in my deck. That's number one. So Beetles are good, and I like the versatility that they provided in this format, and sort of a nice callback to the past in a way. And my favorite uncommon, Station Monitor. Um, a safe bet in any format, and I've actually looked at this. If you look over my history of drafting, blue white is my best performing deck, but like over the course of my entire history by a pretty significant distance. I don't know if it's pretty significant. It's a couple percentage points over everything else. I don't especially know why that is, but Station Monitor in this format is kind of a good example of how it works. Because I mean, this card is just very strong. Again, with the whole two drop thing, again, you should not be surprised to see 2 mana cards in my favorite slots. But I just like the way that this is a two drop that really incentivizes you to play other two drops and play on turn four, and you're getting flyers, you're getting tokens, you're getting artifacts, you're kind of getting everything with this. It's a huge threat. Um, I I think one of the best decks I drafted was blue white in this format. The best deck was not blue white, although the format, as we'll get to, was fairly balanced deck wise. But yeah, I think that this was a fun card to play with, and it did lead to a lot of interesting decisions at times, and I think it was, again, blue white did pretty well for me. The card that caused me the most pain is Singularity Rupture, although it is standing in for all three or four of the, depending on how you count it, of the Wraths in this set. Um, this card, I this card and Zero Point Ballad were really the two that savaged me the most often in terms of like, oh, my opponent has just top decked this after splashing it. Okay, like that was a thing that happened at a frequency higher than I would have liked in this format. I do not generally like playing with or against Wrath of God effects in general because I find the gameplay to not be super enjoyable. It's basically just oh, do they have this thing, or it's like, oh, did they, like, can I afford to play my card, or do I have to like try to play around the 47% chance that my opponent has a Wrath in their hand? It's like, okay, well, like I just like it's the type of calculation that I don't love. Wraths and so, like are a different style of gameplay. If you know, like if I really like two drops and I really like incremental board advantage, as you can kind of see via station monitor being my favorite common, Wraths are the antithesis of generating an advantage incrementally over time. They incentivize really swingy gameplay, which I don't love. Um, but there were a lot of them in this set, and they sure did get me at times. Although you know you don't always see the wrath your opponent does nothing for your opponent. So there's also that card that other people liked a lot more than me. Sunstar Lightsmith I think is my pick for this one in this set. I almost like wouldn't. This is the type of card that I don't think is like necessarily bad. I rated it as a tier 3 in my set review, which is a for the uninitiated, basically an average rating. That's like a very average card. So like you would play this in pretty much any deck, but not be super excited about it. Was kind of how I felt about it. That's still how I feel about it now. Obviously, it is more deck dependent than your average common, or not even common. It's an uncommon, but your average card. It does require a little more deck building, but it's a card that I think people over-index on because really sort of when you boil down to what it asks of you, it's like okay, well you need to get to 5 mana at least, and then you need to be playing a lot of 1 mana cards in your deck, and you need to want to cast them on 5. Um, the nutrient block helped this card out a lot in terms of having something that's 1 mana that's playable and isn't like gonna lose you the game, but you're kind of putting another like card that's mediocre on its own in this shell. This I think this card was fine, but I do think people were like I think Pac One pick winning this card is basically a mistake. I don't really. I'm sure you can construct a pack where it's reasonable, but I think generally I would take like Orbital Plunge over it. I would take Wayfarer over it. I would take you know black removal spells over it even. I think for a white deck specifically, this is kind of a weird thing because it doesn't like in blue white, the deck that in theory is supposed to want this, I didn't really want it because I kind of just wanted to have as many 2 mana spells to trigger my station monitors as possible, and I just didn't really care about this 4 drop that was getting me like value. Like I just didn't care. Like I was like, oh well, what if I instead just have like more 2 drops trigger my station monitors frequently and get like aggressive. I felt like that was a better way to go about things more often than not. But yeah, some people really liked this card, and I just sort of thought it was medium. Biggest surprise for a card was, in my opinion, was Invasive Maneuvers. Invasive Maneuvers, not a good surprise in this particular case. I think Invasive Maneuvers really surprised me to the bad because I thought that it would be dealing 5 pretty often, and that would make it basically insane. Removal was just kind of down in this format. I think this is the worst format for removal spells in terms of 17 lands, game in hand win rate, especially at common, in a very, very long time. Removal is very, like, usually, specifically in red and black, is the best common. Now, red's removal, the orbital plunge is still red's best common, but black having a non removal spell best common, and Virus Beetle, um, blue and green not having removal spells is their best common, and then of course you do have Banishing Light, which is back. So like Banishing Light was really good because it could hit anything, and there were like Invasive Maneuvers played well with Spacecraft, but didn't play well against Spacecraft because dealing the damage to stuff, you couldn't get the Spacecraft off the board if you needed to early, which sometimes you did, and then it can kind of attack you with haste. So I mean, really, this part of the problem with this card is the context, right? Red spacecraft, especially like the the 2 uncommon spacecraft in red were bad. They were expensive and bad, and so this card was not as nearly as good. If those cards were cheaper and good, this card would have been a lot better. So that was obviously part of the problem, and I could have like foreseen that and rated this card lower as a result. Notes for next time there. It is always hard to do context when you're doing set reviews though, because you're just, I'm trying to put them out fast, So it's there's gonna be some hits and some misses, and we are okay with that. But this card did surprise to the bad, just as kind of a harbinger of 2 mana deal three not being as good. And Bombard was another one that surprised me to the bad, because if you remember Strixhaven, that card was like the red's best common was a 3 mana deal four. And in this case, 3 mana deal four was just very medium to slightly bad. So yeah, biggest surprise deck, and in this case, I think that was black white for me. I did not really see how this would work at all. Servandum being a signpost that falls into the 5 mana signpost problem. It has those issues. It's somewhat more difficult than normal casting cost. Although I think that decision actually appears to have been correct in this case. Although I don't think they needed to in this set specifically. I don't think they needed to, because splashing is already kind of hard to do in this set. But I don't think it's a bad choice to give it the extra pip there. Um, I think that was fine. But it was just a very powerful card, and a card that I underrated in my set review, but also just the deck I underrated in the set review. It played well as like an aggressive deck, aggressive sort of attrition-y deck. I would say this is on the better side that Black White has been. You could make a case that it's the most consistently good deck in the format. If you really wanted to make that case, I don't think that would be crazy. Um, you're competing with, I think, your blue white, your green anything, green blue. Blue green is probably like technically it, but blue green likes to splash, so it's sort of not as necessarily consistent and is doing different things every time. Um, but it is kind of interesting though, and I'll talk about like to think about decks in this format, because green ostensibly was the best color at common power level wise, which usually means that one of like the best decks is good, like, are going to be green. And you have blue green, which is a deck that's really good, but red green is not that great. Green white is fine. Like, I would describe it as middle of the road, probably the second best green deck. And then green black is not good either. So like green was the most powerful color at common, but all the decks except for blue green weren't actually that good. And so it was sort of this weird thing where I basically never drafted green in this format. I mean, I guess it's not that weird. That happens in a lot of formats with green, specifically because green. I don't know. It's just sort of. It tends to fade pretty fast. When green is the best color at common, like it was in this set, it tends to just become undraftable for me. Whereas when blue is the best color at common, it just kind of is like I'm drafting it every time. It doesn't, and blue, that doesn't happen that often. It does happen, but it doesn't happen as often. Um, so yeah, sort of interesting dynamics there. Um, and this is my favorite deck of the format. I have drafted Big Boros, and it was very fun, and it trophied, and it was a fun deck. Really enjoyed it. Just a blast to play with this. With this particular assortment of cards. Not the typical curve you would see in a Boros deck, but it did work. Really, the focus fires were keeping everything on on the track here. But a quite good mix of lands and spells, and a lot of big stuff. So definitely a fun one. And now we move to the set rating, and I've given it a 7 out of 10. I have. I've given this. I think this is my second favorite set of the year so far. My power ranking is Final Fantasy 1, Edge of Eternities 2, Ether Drift 3, and then Dark Red Dragonstorm coming in at 4 as of this point. The the set does kind of have some boring-ish vibes. I think part of that is due to being back in the one signpost era. One of the things that I actually do like about this set, though, is that it was kind of just different for the sake of being different, which I think is sometimes good to have in your limited environments. Like we went back to the one signpost per archetype per color pair. I think that's cool to do every now and then, and like sometimes like I think it should be done somewhat frequently, maybe once or twice a year. That's how sets should be designed because you're playing with a different design space for the set when you do that, and there's different considerations when you only have one signpost. But I do think two is largely a better approach. But I think that having a different approach like in this set is good and a good thing to try out from time to time. Similarly, there just aren't as many multicolor cards in the set. When I was doing the set review, it's the shortest the multicolor section's ever been. Again, 10 fewer signposts will do that, but just again, kind of having a more simple card pool is interesting. I do think they did a good job with spacecraft. I actually think spacecraft was a success. I think it was the most. I don't know. I mean, warp was the best of the three mechanics. That was sort of that was my take going in. Was warp is going to be pretty much insane, and almost everything with it is that has any sort of trigger when the warp happens is going to be good. That was largely true. Um, they somehow managed to print a blue 3-drop that was bad with it, but that was everybody kind of saw that coming. The spacecraft, though, I think actually played very well. I think they kind of nailed the numbers for it. I think they kind of got it right more often than they got it wrong in terms of how much you needed to actually station it to get it to be active. I think those numbers were all pretty good. I'm trying to think if there were any that I really didn't like on the number side for it. There's really nothing that stands out in terms of real misses there, and so I think generally that means that they did a pretty good job. I do think that the lander tokens felt a bit like meh. They were fine. They were good. Like they weren't like obviously you'd rather have one than not, but I think the conclusion I came to is that they felt on the whole worse than map tokens to me. Like I think if you had something that made it obviously is context dependent, but I think in the abstract you would rather have something that makes a map token than something that makes a lander token. Was sort of the experience that I was sort of feeling towards the end of the format. I was like, would I rather have it's kind of close, like it's close. Obviously they're worse than clue tokens. Um, that's I think just everybody sort of sees that, but the map token piece of it, I think they're worse than blood tokens too. So and we do miss blood tokens. Blood tokens are cool. We would like to have them back, but they will never come back. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention is a change of pace. Limited fixing. Minimal fixing, no cycle of lands at common, only really the one common fixing land that wasn't even that good. No evolving wilds. I like having an evolving wilds in pretty much every set, but I actually, again, see above the 10 signpost thing. I like they're sort of change for the sake of change in limited sets is actually I think kind of good. That's kind of my take. I do think just having stuff be a little bit different provides more different gameplay, and I think that's fine. I have mentioned that this is sort of the Wrath of God format, which is a ding against it for me. I don't enjoy that style of gameplay so much. Um, so personal preference thing, but it is what it is. And I do think that pretty much everything was draftable if done well. Like we just mentioned, the big Boros of it all. I think you could pretty much do something like that with every like 2-color pair. You could kind of make it work, and that's true in. I mean, it's been true for a little bit. I wouldn't say that was true in Dragonstorm, but it definitely was true in Final Fantasy, which is, in my opinion, the most balanced format maybe ever. And this format, which I think actually was we would be saying that this format was quite balanced. If the set order had been reversed and this came after Dragonstorm and Final Fantasy had come after this, we would have called this set a lot more balanced, because I do think it is quite balanced. Um, I think every color is draftable. There's no color that when I start in it, I feel like, oh man, I really don't want to take this rare because it's red or blue or black or white or green. You know what I mean? Like I think any rare that's good, I'm gonna be happy. It's really more about the type of deck that you want to draft than the color power level. And with that, that's the set re-review. Thank you for joining me. If you have any ways that you would like me to improve the set re-review, or I mean, it's the set awards re-review. I don't know. That's what I'm calling it. Awards of the re-review, whatever. You got any? I got anything for me? Let me know. Subscribe, all that. I'll see you for the Through the Omen Paths set review, which will be soonish because I don't know. They keep being like, "Oh, we're gonna release the card gallery," and there's two card galleries because there's one for paper and one for online, and I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. But I will see you when I do figure it out.